This video is going to talk about carving. Carving is one of those techniques you can just do so much with it. So I'll kind of just touch upon the surface of the tools and how to use the tools to carve. There are a plethora of loop tools. These are also sometimes called ribbon tools. But these loop tools come in different shapes and sizes. You can use them differently to cut different carve marks, I guess is the best way to put that. Whether you're trying to get a deeper carve mark or a shallow carve mark, depending on what you're trying to carve away. Sometimes you're just trying to carve away a tiny inlay for a design, like a cup, and you're just needing a little teeny tiny carve mark. You don't need anything super deep, but you do need it to be thin. And so those carve marks generally come from a thinner or a smaller loop tool. Or you could pick a loop tool that has a point to it. That way you can just use the pointed edge for the carving part. Whereas sometimes you're trying to carve away thicker areas, actually to, carve in to create a like a window or a door. That's what this is used for. Let's see, try to get a good angle on that. That's kind of tricky, but here it's actually like the door has been carved away and the window has been carved away. And so that you would want to be carving a little bit deeper, and you might use a deeper or a larger loop tool for that. So here I'm just going to demonstrate some different lines when you are carving. Again, these thinner loop tools are going to give you thinner carve lines. So very thin. You can do a lot of details with this. Just like that cup we just saw. If I wanted to do these little carve marks. So I could create a very detailed design with that. You can also use the other side. It'll give you a little bit of a wider carve mark. It's just slightly wider. But you'll also notice the difference. Then there are even wider loop tools that are going to get you a lot of different styles. This would be really good if I was trying to carve away a large section of clay. So not as much for details, but great for, if I'm trying to get like a nice rectangle, that would be great. Or I can use the other part of the loop. Again, all just different angles, deeper, wider. This is a large loop tool as well, one of the bigger ones, but that gets you like a really, really large gouge. So, all different varieties there. These ones are helpful for smaller details. They really allow you to, if you're trying to get a certain texture. This is the way to go, these little detail loop tools. So there's a different variety. Now when you're carving, normally you're a lot more intentional than what I'm demonstrating right now. Oftentimes you're trying to create a pattern. Like here is an example of wood grain that has been carved out. Here's an example of brick, sort of like the plaster peeling away from the brick. So that's another example. But again, these are tiny, tiny details. So sometimes for a really, really thin line, you could use your pin tool. and a ruler to create these very tiny details. So all I did was I actually just pressed into the clay. I was not carving away at it. I was simply pressing the pin tool into the clay. So keep that in mind, that some of these very tiny detail marks are simply just the pin tool. But what gets tricky about a pin tool is if you're ever trying to move and to create a curved line, it gets really gunky. So if I get close to that, it's really sloppy. It looks kind of cool, but when you touch it, all these little pieces of clay are gonna come off, and in the long run, it's really poor craftsmanship. It's not well done at all. So you have to keep that in mind. I would also always suggest starting with a little practice clay when you're trying to do a detail like that, and practice little squiggle lines, because here with this tiny loop tool I can achieve those little squiggle lines without the gunky crummies, the little clay crummies like I call them. So if I'm trying to create these details of wood per se, or anything, I was able to create those squiggle lines, and it's much cleaner. I'm not getting all those gunkies like I did over here with the pin tool. So keep that in mind for tiny details like that, especially if you're trying to create something that looks like something else. So if I'm trying to make a piece of wood, that's the way I would go with that. So now, you know, I have my little wood piece right there. So that is just a very, very light introduction to carving.